What's up, everybody? Today we're going to talk about Ahsoka, episodes 4 and 5. There's kind of a lot to cover, so let's just hop into it. Episode 4, at the time of its release, was the best episode of Ahsoka yet, and it had impacts for the rest of the show that people may or may not have seen coming. So I guess I'd just like to start out with talking about Hera and the New Republic. Obviously, the New Republic is going to be super unhelpful in this time. We know what happens to them in less than 20 years at this point. So it makes sense that they would be kind of weak, sort of like the Imperial Senate, just kind of ineffective and unhelpful in a lot of scenarios. So it makes sense that they wouldn't be willing to help or spend resources to go look into these things that are happening in the show. I am glad that Hera, true to her character, did what she felt was right and went to help, regardless of the hierarchy that commands her. And it was also nice to get Carson back. Obviously, Carson is like the Phil Coulson of the Mandoverse. He's just everywhere, has his hands in everything, and he's a good, likable guy. One thing I do wish we would have got, we did get some X-Wing fighters with Carson that went with Hera to go help. It would have been cool to get Mark Matten in the show from Rebels. Obviously, it's a small character. People might not even want to see him. But I think that would have been cool. He has a connection to the Rebels crew and to Ezra, so it would have been nice to get him to go and, try to help out his friends. Or you could have had Wedge, honestly. You could have brought Wedge in, even though Wedge probably wouldn't have disobeyed orders. You could have got Zeb, even though Zeb's a Y-Wing pilot. Could have brought him in. You already got his character model. But, I mean, these are just nitpicks. We didn't need it. I guess it still remains to be seen whether or not Hera is going to be with the New Republic by the end of the show, whether the events that happen later in the second half of the season are going to get her like special commendations for seeing these things and fighting against these things that are going to be happening, or whether or not they'll get her retired from the New Republic. We did get a couple of good fight scenes in episode 4. Obviously, we got Shin versus Sabine, which was better than their first fight. We got Ahsoka versus Merrick, which was arguably better than their first fight as well. And we got Ahsoka versus Balin, which was really good. So I guess let's start by talking about the first one. Shin versus Sabine was a better fight than the first one that happened in episode 1. And it was more in line with her fights with Yar Saxon and Rebels. It was always a better idea to go full Mando fit and then have the lightsaber as well. Sabine and other non-Force users, that's where their strength lies, is lightsaber combat. But if you can't use the Force, then you might as well just incorporate all of your strengths along with the lightsaber combat. And she did a much better job fighting Shin than she did the last time. Now, in this fight, they did have a moment, obviously, where Sabine tries to use the Force. And I'm thinking that by the end of the show, that's where we're leading. But I don't want to get into that right now. I'll get into that later because I have thoughts on that. Ahsoka versus Merrick was a good fight, and obviously Ahsoka fought Merrick in episode 2, and he got away. This time he was not so lucky. A lot of people were speculating on who Merrick could be. Is it Barriss? Is it Starkiller? Is it Ezra himself? I didn't think any of those were good theories, to be honest. And I hoped he would just be a new character, an Inquisitor who didn't have to see his face, didn't have to know his name, other than Merrick, the last Inquisitor. And I think that's the end of him because Ahsoka definitely killed him. And to everyone's surprise, his identity was that he was a suit full of farts. And obviously, it was Green Night Sister Mist. So he was either resurrected or he was being held together by magic, or maybe he was just created with magic. Who knows? But I don't think we're going to find out, to be honest. And I don't know that we particularly need to. Now, I do like this fight for a few reasons, aside from the fact that it just looks cool and looks good. Reason number one is I like that they showed Ahsoka's power level versus that of an Inquisitor. Obviously, in Rebels, we saw her throw around the fifth brother and the seventh sister, and they couldn't really touch her. And then obviously in Tales of the Jedi, she destroyed that one Inquisitor that looked like he had a crow mask. So it's nice that there was consistency there and that Merrick wasn't suddenly just the most powerful Inquisitor ever out of nowhere who could hold his ground. Obviously, Ahsoka was going to cut him down if she wanted to, and that's what happened. Another thing I like about this fight is that it really reminds me of the fight that Obi-Wan had with Maul in Rebels. Just a few quick movements, very calculated, precise, cut down your enemy, that's it. We're not trying to drag this out, we're just trying to get it over with because there's bigger fish to fry. I thought Ahsoka's duel with Balin was really good too, and I think it helped to show how much of a match Balin is for Ahsoka. Obviously, we've seen in many mediums how powerful Ahsoka is. And when you think about just your typical Jedi, like we've seen plenty of Jedi just get killed by battle droids or bounty hunters or what have you. So it's nice to know that there is some real threat there with Balin because Balin can hold his own against Ahsoka. So it's nice to be able to see Balin's power and just see that he's a threat, not just an obstacle for our heroes. As soon as Ahsoka told Sabine to destroy the map, I knew that Balin was going to get his hands on it because I knew Sabine wasn't going to destroy it. I didn't necessarily think she'd give it to him willingly, but it doesn't surprise me that she did. Obviously, she wants to save Ezra, and Balin seems like a trustworthy guy. Like, maybe not a great guy, but I trust him to keep his word at the very least. So I get why that whole turn of events happened. And then, of course, the ending, which everyone was freaking out about at the time. Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds, and Hayden Christensen is there as Anakin. It's always nice to see Hayden Christensen. I'm glad that he's back involved with Star Wars. He got way too much hate when the prequels came out, and it's nice to just see the fan base really rally behind him and appreciate him for all he does. Jumping in episode 5 just a little bit, I don't know, or at least I don't think that Ahsoka was ever in the World Between Worlds physically. Obviously, at the end of episode 5, well, not the end, toward the end of episode 5, she's in the water where she fell in episode 4. But I'm thinking that it's just all in her head, or at least some sort of force vision or something. I don't think she was there physically and then back in the water. But that's just me. Jumping into episode 5 fully, let's just continue to talk about Ahsoka and Anakin. Obviously, Anakin said he was there to complete Ahsoka's training and gave her the choice live or die. This whole World Between Worlds, Anakin and Ahsoka Force Vision thing, I'm kind of unclear about its purpose. If it comes back around later in the season, in an episode or 2 or 3 or what have you, I'd like that. Otherwise, the only purpose I can see past just fan service, the only purpose I can see to having that whole section in there would be to just emphasize that Ahsoka's in the water, she's drowning, Anakin's there, live or die, you have to fight through so that you can survive because you're dying. Obviously, we have that in TV shows and movies all the time where characters are like fading away toward death, and then they have an inside their mind experience where they're trying to just fight through what's happening to them physically. They're fighting through it in their head. So unless it's something like that, I feel like this whole part of the episode needs to come back around later in the season, or maybe just later in like a second season if Ahsoka gets a second season. I don't know. I feel like we need a little bit more. That being said, it was great to see everything we did get. Obviously, Anakin came back to finish Ahsoka's training, and he's showing her things that he can still show her since no one's too old to learn new things. And we get back to the Clone Wars era. We see Phase 1 clones, physical suits that didn't exist until right now. Great to see. We got to see in the background Phase 1 Rex, Anakin. Oh my goodness, Hayden Christensen in Clone Wars armor. I always wanted it, and I never thought we'd get it. But, you know, Dave Filoni's out here fulfilling people's dreams. We got a young Ahsoka who was played by the same actress that played young Gamora in Avengers Endgame, and she did a great job. And Hayden Christensen looked great and sounded great. I love that Hayden Christensen is incorporating the feel of Anakin that Matt Lanter gave us. So he's kind of like this in between prequels Anakin and Clone Wars Anakin, and it's just great. It's the perfect blend. It all feels like one character now. Sometimes it was hard to think about Clone Wars Anakin being the same Anakin we got in the movies, but this definitely just bridges the gap and meshes it together, and it's great. I love it. After that whole battle, we go to the Siege of Mandalore. Again, everything just looked so good. You got clones, you got Ahsoka in the Siege of Mandalore outfit, you got Hayden Christensen in his Revenge of the Sith outfit. We even got Tamora Morrison back, obviously as all the clones, but live action Rex actually had some lines. Looked so good, felt so good. It was so surreal to see. I don't know, it's just so strange that we finally have this. Like, how did we get here? How did we get from where Star Wars was to this? Because I am loving it. Oh, and we even got to see Maldalorians, as they're called. I think they're Mandalorian Loyalists, is their actual name, if I'm not mistaken. But the Maldalorians. And they look great in live action, too. It's so crazy to see all these animated characters and designs come into live action. Especially in this episode, everything we got just looked so good, translated to live action so well. And then throughout these flashbacks, in some instances, and even when we get back to the world between worlds, Anakin is like going between Anakin and Darth Vader for the lesson that he's trying to teach Ahsoka. And it looks really good. Like the cuts or the editing, whatever they did to make it look like that, looks really good. And can I just say that I'm not always the biggest fan of these Star Wars shows being filmed on the volume, but these flashbacks for the Clone Wars and Siege of Mandalore looked really good for the volume, and I'm really impressed with how they looked. When it's all said and done, Ahsoka makes her choice. She chooses to live, and Anakin says, "There's hope for you yet." And then she comes to in the water, and they find her. On the other side of things, Hera and Huyang and Carson and Jason and Chopper, they're all looking for Ahsoka and Sabine. They don't know what's happened. And it's really cool to see Jason get some Force moments. Confirmation that he's Force sensitive, if we didn't already know that. I don't think they ever confirmed that. We just all suspected, obviously, because Kanan was his father. And it was also nice to see that Kanan got a name drop. And obviously, Carson's reaction to that is everyone who didn't watch Rebels just being like, okay. But, it's really cool for us who are Rebels fans. I thought the moment where Jason heard the lightsabers and heard the duel between Ahsoka and Anakin in the water was really cool. And I'm glad that he called Hera over and Hera could hear it too. It makes sense that Hera felt Kanan's presence in Rebels and she can hear this too. Does that mean that Hera is a little bit Force sensitive, or that if you just listen and concentrate hard enough, you can feel things? Because obviously anyone can use the Force. So maybe Hera's just understanding of the Force from being with Kanan so long kind of rubbed off on her, and she can just, calm her mind and understand things a little bit better than the average person. But either way, it's a cool thing. It really does make me want Jason to be trained as a Jedi. I don't know why he hasn't been trained as a Jedi. Obviously, you've got Ahsoka out there. You've got Luke out there. You could get Jason some training if you wanted to. I'm thinking maybe Hera doesn't want him to be trained because of what happened to Kanan and Ezra. But I would like to see Jason become a Jedi, or at least train to be one. What I don't want to happen, though, is him go join Luke and be one of the people that dies in the sequel trilogy in the whole flashback thing with Kylo Ren. But, I mean, hey, someone's got to go. It was also nice to have Leia name dropped in this. Not Leia, but Senator Organa. Obviously, there's only one still kicking, so it was Leia. I really think that that's sort of the only real thing in the Mandoverse, that kind of just feels off is that we don't have enough of the main gang from the original trilogy. We've seen Luke, we haven't seen anyone else. But it was nice to have Leia name dropped. I feel like with things like this, Thrawn's return and fallen Jedi, gray Jedi, as they say, even though gray Jedi aren't really canon, they're more just fallen Jedi. It really does feel weird to not rope Luke into this to come help. Obviously, Mark Hamill's too old to be doing this. Even if he's a part of it, Luke is a CG character, so to speak. He's a deep fake. So it's really hard to have him be involved too much, which is kind of the only thing that makes the Mandoverse feel a little strange. But it is nice to still get some name drops and get some references because obviously these characters are still out there. What point in their lives the rest of them are in, we don't know, but they're out there, doing whatever it is they're doing. And then at the end of the episode, we get a very Ezra moment with Ahsoka where they decide that we're going to use the Purrgil to go follow Sabine and go find Ezra and stop Thrawn. And it was very reminiscent of Ezra standing on top of the ship at the end of the episode of Rebels when they introduced the Purrgil, where the Purrgil are just, chilling next to the Ghost. And Ahsoka reaches out the same way that Ezra reaches out and just connects with them. And it's nice to see that Ahsoka also can connect with them. Obviously, Ezra has that animal affinity, but Ahsoka, as we've seen in Tales of the Jedi, has an affinity for animals in some capacity as well. And a lot of Force users do. So it's nice to see that she uses that power to be able to talk to the Purrgil, and we've got a plan, We're going to ride in the whale's mouth like Jonah and go to our destination. And can I just say that from about that moment to the end of the episode when Hera says, "May the Force be with you," the music was really hitting. I don't know if it was just me, but the music was really hitting there. Like it felt really powerful for some reason. I don't know if that was just me, but I felt it. Well, since we've covered just about everything I want to talk about in episode 4 and 5, let's get on to fan theories. Obviously, the fan theory about Merrick, or the many fan theories about Merrick, kaput, gone. Y'all better stop with this Merrick nonsense. My fan theories, however, are still on track. I think Balin could still die by the end of this season. I think Shin could still come around by the end of the season back to the light, or somewhat to the light. I can't remember what other theories I had, but those are the two I remember, and they're still on track. I haven't struck out yet. This got cut out of my last video because my mic died, but I did make a little YouTube short about it. I can still, through episode 4, see them pushing this whole narrative that Sabine is going to use the Force by the end of this show, and I really hope they don't. I don't want it. I want Sabine to be able to use the Force in the way that Chirrut did in Rogue One. Mentally, you can predict opponent attacks and dodge or block or whatever. But I don't want her to physically use the Force. If she starts pushing and pulling things with the Force, it's going to feel like Chirrut was kind of just thrown out the window a little bit. This whole concept that you can be super in tune with the Force and still not be able to manifest it physically. I really hope we don't take the route of anyone can use the Force physically. I like anyone can use the Force mentally, the way that Yoda explains it to the clones in the first episode of Clone Wars, where he says, "You can use the Force. It resides in all living things. You can use it to quiet your mind and sharpen your mind." I really hope that's the route we're going. I don't want her to be pushing and pulling things. I can't tell you how much I don't want that. I have faith in Dave Filoni, but please don't do this. And then again, to reiterate, I really hope the World Between Worlds thing comes back around. Whether it's we see Anakin as a physical Force ghost in I was about to say the real world, but I guess that's not really Star Wars. On whatever planet we're on, physically manifested, I hope we see Force Ghost Anakin or Ahsoka goes back to the world between worlds in her mind or what have you. I really hope it comes back around. Maybe it's not needed for the story. Let me know if you think it is. Maybe that's just the fan in me that wants it to come back around. Maybe I just want more Hayden Christensen Anakin, but hey, sue me. I still think this show has the potential to introduce some characters from animation still, or reintroduce other characters from other Star Wars projects that aren't in the show yet. I think there's still time for that. Whether or not it happens remains to be seen. Whether or not it's needed, probably not. But I would love to still see Zeb or Callus or someone. I don't know. Maybe we could get a Force Ghost of Obi-Wan. Who knows? If the story permits it, I'd love it. If the story doesn't need it, that's fine. We don't need it. I don't want it forced in there. It needs to feel natural. It needs to still be good storytelling. So if it's in the cards for this show, I'd love it. But if not, then so be it. Maybe sometime down the line. Oh, and by the way, before I forget, if you've made it to this part of the video, let me know who you think is in the new galaxy. Obviously, Ezra's going to be there, and Thrawn's going to be there, and probably some Purgle. But who do we think's going to be there? And what I mean by that is, I'm thinking we're setting up the Yuzon Vong. That's just me. Let me know your thoughts. Well, this has been my discussion slash sort of a review of episodes 4 and 5 of Rebels. Let me know your opinions down in the comments. If you want to help me out, subscribe, like, comment, share. My phone just had the low battery thing come up, so I don't know if we're still recording. But yeah, if you want to help me out with the algorithm, there are things.